Hi again. Welcome back to the channel. Let's go through some of the latest developments in my AI journey. I'd love to share it with you, get feedback, and basically talk through all of this because there's so much to digest. It seems like every week almost there's a new model and there's like whole new set of capabilities, and what wasn't like previously possible or practical just weeks or months ago was suddenly now quite doable, which is it's really exciting, but it definitely requires a ton of just paying attention and just being up to date on what the capabilities these AI models enable, right? And it's also important because a lot of times what was previously, as I said, maybe if not impossible, impractical, or just really, really difficult is in many cases made much easier, because as we use the AI models, a lot of us are going to be running into kind of similar pain points. We ratchet our expectations and soon enough what we initially were kind of so impressed by becomes like just baseline expectations. And so it becomes almost like this treadmill where you, as a technology person building a product, just have to keep iterating and keep improving so that your users keep coming back. So a lot has happened in the past number of days, weeks or so. I had the chance to go to Singapore, in fact, and actually, I was invited. Well, I was part of a kind of a generative AI kind of meetup startup event, and there was the audience, consisted of not just other startup founders and entrepreneurs and tech people, but also people from the industry, people from probably like the government, maybe regulatory bodies or trade representatives, whereby they want to like make it easier to invest into these sectors in that country, as well as corporates who kind of publish problem statements or use cases that they'd like to see the tech startups help address, help provide solutions for. So that was very, very eye-opening, and there were dozens and dozens of different AI startups, a number of very, very large corporates. I was very fortunate to make a number of really, really cool connections, really interesting people. And the key takeaway, I think, is that it's still so early. It is still so early in terms of the total adoption. Where we are in terms of the adoption curve, we are very early, and I think that the corporates, the large enterprises, they're a few steps behind where the consumer state of the art is in terms of generative AI. I think they're still trying to wrap their heads around like how this new way of working, like just the nature of the Gen AI startup itself is that it's, when you're dealing with generative AI, it's very much probabilistic rather than very fixed and defined in terms of what you can expect from your software as a response. Like you give it an input and you expect some output. For so many decades, we have come to assume that many or most of all of these systems are very rote, kind of, in a lot of ways, rules-based systems, whereby it's very simple, if this, then that statements for the most part. But with generative AI, we're now in a new regime whereby we have to be more granular, or I would say the responses can vary on a more granular level. They would still be quite close to what your expectation is, but there's always going to be some bit of unpredictability in it. And that's just the nature of it. That's part of what makes it so exciting as well, is because it can help us with creative tasks and other things like that. But I think for a lot of businesses, for many businesses, they want solutions that are very repeatable, very reliable, and pretty much don't change much. At least that's how the traditional thinking has been. In a generative AI world, that is going to be we have to somewhat change our perspective on this a little bit. And that doesn't mean that we can't do things to kind of help guide the model to exactly what we want from it. But just the nature of, like, asking it to describe something. Like, let's say I want to look at these glasses here, these drinking glasses. There's almost, there's an enormous number of ways to describe this image, what these products are. Just speaking in different languages, right? Just talking about different languages. I can describe this in Thai. I can describe this in English. I can describe this in many different languages. What we have here looks like a pack of 4 glasses. Now, these glasses are not the kind of glasses you wear as spectacles. These are glasses that you would drink from. Specifically, they are 10-ounce drinking glasses. So typically these are served drinks. So this type of glass would be the type that you would add ice to, for example, for cold beverages, which would be different from another form of glass whereby maybe it would be a different type of beverage that you would serve that in. So just going into the description of this, right? Going beyond just the keyword of glasses or glass, because even glass can mean many things, right? It's a building material. It's used in lots of different products, and then glasses, the plural form of that. You might think, well, are you talking about sunglasses, reading glasses, right? Drinking glasses, right? So we can describe this in a lot of different ways. So here we have a set of beautiful glasses, and then as we talked about last time, what the cool thing about ShopBirdy is, because it's an AI-powered search engine, if I were to search for glasses, I could get lots of different kinds of glasses, right? So let's just try that. Let's look for glasses. Let's see what ShopBirdy can pull up for me. Oh, let's try glasses. All right, a little typo there. So as you can see, I have many different forms and shapes and quantity of glasses. So immediately I would be looking, then using my visual kind of interpretation of this to determine, well, in my mind, when I asked for glasses, I also had some other context in my mind that I could have included in that request. So or maybe I just want to see what is on offer in terms of glasses, and then I'll choose from a selection. So the cool thing about ShopBirdy is it supports obviously the text-based searching using words and descriptions, as well as the visual-based searching. So in this case, let's say I don't mean wine glasses in that sense. Let's say I'm thinking more about drinking glasses. So then I would search for drinking glasses, and then if I found a set of drinking glasses that I really liked, maybe I'd want to see if there's anything else along those lines, and then maybe I would make my decision and make my purchase order. So that is kind of what we mean when we are saying, like, we have so much more context available to us in an AI world, that we need to kind of like calibrate more in the 3D space of tokens, of words, of ideas, of thoughts. And I think one of the benefits that AI and generative AI brings us is it helps us navigate different spaces, different ideas, right? It gets us through an idea maze. It helps us to plan, it helps us to sort, it helps us to optimize, it helps us to make decisions more quickly, and it brings us information that we may not have necessarily considered initially, but is then valuable. So then when it is added into our context, our contextual decision-making process, we're now operating with much more richer, more relevant, more detailed information. But it doesn't necessarily have to overwhelm us either. We can still, even with more context and more data, we can still come to good decisions just as quickly. So this is just a kind of an overview kind of explanation of how software is different and is changing in a world of generative AI, right? So it's much more exploratory, I think. It's much more, there's more discovery. There's more paths that you can take. And as a result, this means you can reach more people, you can serve more people, you can be more nuanced, you can be more specific, you can be more general in your requests. And through iterations, through simple refinement of the total available options, you can get to a place to where you're getting exactly what you're looking for. So let's apply this idea of kind of like how AI can help us with planning, with routing, with optimizing, with sorting. And let's take an example of logistics. Okay, logistics, huge, massive industry, right? It's how we get these products from the factories to the store shelves and ultimately into your cabinets if you're buying glasses, for example. This is a very complex thing. This is a supply chain, and in some cases, the supply chain must be adaptable or flexible, right? Because consumer preferences change. Like sometimes, there are companies out there who wait for enough demand signals before they actually produce the product, right? So I think Shein and Temu might be examples of that if you're talking about e-commerce, whereby they might present a hypothetical or an idea for a product, like in terms of e-commerce, and based on the engagement or the clicks or the interest or the views that those, and basically just the reaction by the user base to that product offer, then they'll make a decision on whether or not they would produce that product. If they're getting enough potential buy signals, it's very valuable data, and it helps them predict the demand and plan their supply or plan their production. So there's tons of value in just presenting choices to people, presenting options, presenting a catalog of products, and then leveraging what people are interacting with, what they're finding most appealing, most interesting, as signal to help our supply chain to understand what are the styles and the quantities that we should produce, right? So to the extent that you can help make all of this more efficient, I think that would go a long way in terms of bringing down costs for everyday people, and also helping businesses do a better job of planning so that they can meet that demand, so that they have the supply, and also to help them determine what is the next product they should add to the catalog. There's so many industries whereby change is inherent to that industry, right? There are certain things where you have standardization, and you don't expect the components of that product to change very much, right? You want to make sure that we have, let's say, a standard way of measuring things, right? So if we're talking about milliliters or ounces, for example, or meters or feet or yards, we need to have some sort of common set of parameters that we can use so that the products and the production process fit smoothly into our end-to-end supply chain and value chain. But then there are other things whereby creativity and change and seasons and trends also play a part. And that's where you might have things like, for example, fashion, or even the types of foods that people are eating, or even just habits like, reusing things that previously we might have just tossed, we might have thrown away. Then we want to maybe buy something more durable, keep that around, reuse that, and save long-term costs in doing so. So there will be times where people want to change the colors, change the style, change the look and feel, right? There are other things whereby, like, a size of a plate, a bowl, a cup, forks, silverware, that kind of thing, those are mostly kind of like set at this point. We've kind of figured out how those products fit into our lives. So it wouldn't make sense for me to, create a pot or a pan that doesn't fit in your on your range, or a bowl that doesn't fit within your microwave, right? Or a container that can't easily be stored in the refrigerator. So there are certain things, although they're not directly, they're definitely highly correlated, even though they are not exactly the same product category, but they're part of this overall mix, or they're part of these adjacent or kind of like related industries, right? So that's just a kind of roundabout way of talking about things like globalization, things like, if I'm producing a pot or a pan, a cup, a bowl, and I have a factory in Asia, and I want to serve the world, then we need to ensure that we're producing a product that can work for all these different places in all these different countries. And so by having some standard way of, whether it's electronics, home appliances, whether it's just furnitures, we're going to have these standards. But within that, lots of ability to be creative, lots of ability to have different styles and so forth. But there's still like some basic kind of parameters that are in place. So that's just a commentary, I guess, on how the world. Because the thing is, like, what I believe benefits us as people, and definitely in businesses, is the more that we can actually kind of like in some way define our life or our operation in software, that helps us to plan and adjust for different scenarios better. So like, using the example of the cookware, like, you want to make sure you're producing something that's like within the human form, that fits within general kind of furniture dimensions, that can be like of the weight, the heft, the density, and all those things that is expected of it. So if I'm shipping, pallets of pots and pans and bowls and spoons and forks, generally, depending on the type of material that I'm gonna be shipping that in, generally a full container ship of that will have a predictable weight, I guess you could say, right? Like, you're gonna load all these items, and you may have some of them are wood, some are ceramic, some are metal, some are glass, but in general, we're gonna have generally a predictable weight for certain things. If not predictable, well, then at least within a reasonable range. But of course, all of that varies. I mean, these containers, the container ships can carry cargo, but what's the form of that cargo? How do I need to store that cargo? If I'm sending, if I'm sending like, I don't know, shrimp from Thailand down to Singapore, for example, how would I best package that shrimp? Can it be shipped on a boat? Would I drive it there? Do I have to fly it there? How do I pack it? Is it sealed? Are they these shrimp still intact? Are they stored on ice? Am I storing it in a like cooled container? All of these factors and inputs and parameters go into how we plan our shipping, right? Because it's one thing to order something online, but then the next thing is, how do I deliver it? How do I get the product from the warehouse to the customer, right? And those are things that a lot of us don't quite think about because it's just magic, right? We order something online, and through the magic of GPS, it figures out how to get to us. And to me, generative AI, this GPT, is the new GPS. And there's a whole set of potentially multi-billion-dollar companies that are going to be enabled by this GPT, by this GenAI, just as there were for GPS. Think about it. How many products that we use today, huge products, that were not even really possible until we could use smartphones with GPS, right? Take Uber, for example, or Grab, or DoorDash, or Lyft, right? None of those big companies were possible prior to smartphones having GPS and having that be a feature that developers could tap into, right? And that goes beyond, I mean, just think about Google Maps. How many of us travel every single day and we rely on Google Maps, right? Without it, it would be hard to navigate, even our own city in a lot of cases. Some of us don't even know how to really do a turn-by-turn navigation without actually referencing Google Maps. So that's an example of how just the idea of GPS and Google Maps have enabled so much commerce and so much possibility, right? Even more fun examples like I don't know if anyone remembers Foursquare or Pokemon Go, but those were location-based services as well. You could check into a location, you unlock a badge, or you get some points, and then you would try to compete with other people to become the mayor of a certain location based on, like how often you checked in. You were a loyal customer, you frequented that establishment, and you checked in and shared with your friends, and that's how you gain status, for example, right? Later on, that kind of became baked into things like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter X, where the location was just an automatic tag that you could just apply to any of your photos. And that photo would have all that metadata plugged in, and then you could do location-based search. You could look for other things around you. You could share with your friends where you're at, where they're at, and you could plan and meet up. So this idea of, to me, the one of the kind of like metaphors, I guess, or analogies to GPS today, now that we're sort of in a post Web 2.0 and post mobile app world, now we're in sort of a generative AI world. To me, that's what the transformers model, that's the T in the GPT. I think that's what that's the new unlock for us. That's the new kind of key ingredient that now makes so many more technologies and services possible, right? I go back to my days way back when I was working on the original Transformers for Xbox, back when I was working as in a video game development studio. And back then, if you wanted to travel to Thailand, um, you know, the amount of data available on the internet to plan all of your, like, all your sightseeing, was not anywhere near what it is today. Nowadays, people just jump right to TikTok, and they kind of pre-experience all of the sights and the sounds before they even arrive. And in some cases, I don't know if it makes the travel experience. It probably makes the travel experience better in some ways, because like what you want kind of before you get there. But I also think sometimes it kind of might make us feel less excited once we actually arrive, because we've been consuming those videos so much, reading all the reviews, that it kind of biases or even kind of like dilutes our own initial impressions of what it would feel like if we were just there for the arriving there for the first time. But not to ramble here too much, but if you're seeing my screen now, you'll notice that I've got this logistics planner tool that I've been building over the weekend. It's now basically spring break time in Thailand, so it's sort of a holiday, and the seasons are starting to change. I think we might start entering into the rainy season, and right now we are in the Songkran festival, the Thai New Year festival, and it's kind of a symbolic change of the seasons, and I think a lot of us see Songkran as the more modern day equivalent that we see when we look on social media. But this is a very, very historical and traditional kind of celebration that marks the passage of time and helps us reorient ourselves to the next season, whether that's in an agrarian society, right? It's really important that you plan your crops and you water them, and then you sow, or you reap those crops, right? So where am I going with all of this? Well, I guess I wanted to kind of explain how important it is to plan for different scenarios, and by using AI to make planning more efficient. There are so many different inefficiencies that we can remove, we can improve, and each of these can have kind of a major effect on the final output, the final cost of goods, right? Done and dusted, like completely shipped from order to fulfillment. There are probably so many different steps along the way, whereby if we just made a slight improvement, a slight recalibration, then the ripple effect across all of those stages in the supply chain could lead to massive savings, and then that could help the economics of the business, and put it more in line with where the consumers are, and then what the kind of margins that the businesses need to operate sustainably. All right, so what this tool does is it helps essentially, if you're trying, one of the biggest input costs to shipping globally is fuel prices, and the fuel prices are fluctuating because it is also something that is based on supply and demand, and your fleet, or how you drive, which roads you decide to take, what are the other environmental factors, those can have impacts on your fuel consumption. Fuel consumption is a cost. It's harder for small businesses and individuals to stock up on fuel. It's one of those things, it's a purchase where you can I guess you could, theoretically as a business, you could hedge your fuel prices. But if you are an individual consumer, I don't know of a way for you to prepay for fuel for your individual vehicle, to lock in a rate. And I definitely don't think it's practical to stock up on fuel, like to have a personal storage of fuel. That just doesn't seem to work. So as a result, like the fluctuation of the fuel prices, of oil prices, has massive implications across the entire economy, because it is still how we move products and services around the world. So, but because now we are living in a now AI-enabled world, we can then use all of this historical data around fuel consumption and weather modeling and vehicle maintenance and all kinds of different optimization techniques in terms of like pathfinding and routing, to create lots of maybe micro savings, but over time those really add up significantly. And it's really important, because it's almost like how inflation creeps up on us, you know, because if you keep adding 1% to something's price every week or every day, I mean that has compounding effect, right? And it's really hard once a price establishes itself for it to come back down. It's really hard to do that. So fuel is one of the most important inputs into the global economy, and it too fluctuates in price based on, right, global demand and global supply. So, and there are going to be times of the year where your fuel consumption may be higher than other times of the year. If you are living in an area with different seasonal weather patterns, right, that might affect your fuel consumption. That might affect the traffic on the roads. And just the factor of traffic and weather could also impact your fuel consumption, how much fuel you'll need. And if you're managing a huge fleet, like, I don't know, how many semi-trucks, vans, motorbikes for doing the last mile delivery, as well as shipping products across the ocean or over the air, right? Air freight, all of these are going to be different inputs that you'll need to factor into your business plan, your operating plan. So to the extent that we can use AI in all of its contextual ability to pack in lots of context and make sense of it all, and also in conjunction with proven ML models that can take historical data and help us make predictions based on historical, and then using GenAI to create the synthetic data or create all of the scenarios, the potential future scenarios or forecasts, or just events that then the model could adapt itself or update itself to. I think that is really powerful. So even though I believe that the business world is much slower, it's lagging in terms of its adoption of these tools, I think there's no doubt that these kinds of platforms are going to have huge, massive positive impacts to making the world much more efficient, to make the flow of goods and services smoother, to ensure quality, to be more resilient in the face of different weather events and other things like that, and more predictable in the sense whereby you'll now have AI helping you think about things that you didn't consider, and helping you to plan for a bunch of different scenarios that might be too much for us to keep in our mind at one point. But with AI, it can help us organize and collate all of that. So let's just take this for example, right? So I have this open source mapping, and what I've done is I've actually placed different ports in this map. The ports are these waypoints, and they're well known, well established. If you look at the major cities around the world, a lot of them are connected by key infrastructure like ports. This is where all those big shipping containers dock and unload their cargo or get loaded with cargo. But the difference between drawing routes and maps on a nautical map versus, for example, through the air or on land, is obviously the sea navigation is different from air navigation, which is different from road navigation. So there are a lot of techniques and other algorithms and data sources that you can use so that when you are building a route planning system, you are considering, for example, shipping lanes versus road lanes versus air flight lanes. So this is a very simple example. It has not yet been completely kind of like I don't have all of the edge cases hardened, and I don't have yet all of the data, but I'm working towards it. But I think it gives us a good sense of if I'm just like a logistics planner. I'm working for a large company. We purchase a lot of fuel every year. It's one of our main costs, and it's a cost of doing business. I mean, it's just something that has to be baked into our operations, right? In order for me to help the company's bottom line, it's really important for me to make fuel purchases at convenient times for the business. B, to make sure that we are using the available fuel stock that we have most efficiently. C, looking for any kind of alternative routes or other ways that I can make sure that my business is more adaptable and flexible. And I think GenAI can be a very powerful way to do that. So using natural language, I can ask this system to plot a route from any 2 points, origin to final destination, and use AI to help me map that out, what that might look like. So in this case, I'm looking for plot the shortest sea route from Singapore port to Lam Shabang, which I think is it is the port on the eastern seaboard of Thailand. Within the I think this is is this the Bay of Bangkok or the Gulf of Thailand? So the eastern seaboard on this, in terms of Thailand, is this part here. So it's different from the east coast of the United States, for example. This is sort of an inlet, or in sort of not a cove. I think this is a bay. I believe that's what this is called. And more generally speaking, this is the body of water here known as the Gulf. But yeah, there's lots of geological formations and different terminologies when we're talking about sea routes. Lam Shabang, I think, is also the deep sea port of Thailand. And that's the other thing, is the sea levels or the water levels, right? So if you're talking about heavy container ships, where the bottoms of the ships go further down the surface level, and also the displacement of the water as they enter certain bodies of water is different than very lightweight boats, whereby you're mostly skimming the surface. So you would need to, in order to improve this, you'd need to factor in all of those things. You're not just simply plotting two independent points in space. You're actually accounting for the sea depth, the coastline, and all the water territories, and ensuring that you have rights of passage through those things. So let's say, let's try another one. Plan a ro-ro vessel route from Bangkok port, Klong Thoi, to Penang port, right? So a ro-ro is a roll-on, roll-off. So those are the kinds of container ships that vehicles can be shipped on, because you can just basically drive the vehicle onto that boat. You can drive the sport utility vehicle, or the sports car, the pickup truck, whatever it may be, the van. You can keep it assembled and drive it onto that ship, and then you can drive it off. So that's the ro-ro, the roll-on, roll-off. So I can actually ask it to plot a route from Bangkok to Penang, which is one of the key ports of Malaysia. Now, again, I'm using a mix of GenAI, ML, and other data sources. Some cases I have used predefined data. In other cases, I'm using ML to kind of figure out the plotting. There's thankfully, this is the case with machine learning, is that people over the generations, over the centuries, have come up with really good formulas, right? Cartesian calculations, nautical navigations, right? The world is a globe, but in this form, we're plotting it as a flat map. People have figured out that there's a curvature to the world, and that you need to adjust these lines to be curved around the planets. So thankfully, I don't need to do all those calculations. I can use a library to help me with that. But of course, I need to adapt it to my specific use cases. So it'd be very simple for me to, for example, just plot any 2 points in space. But then what you then need to do is figure out all of the nuance between how do we actually go from Singapore to Bangkok, or from Bangkok to LA, or better yet, San Diego, for example. So when I ask these, this GenAI to help me with the route suggestion, it's going to try its best, all right? And sometimes, because of the time it takes for it to come up with an answer, we might need to adjust our timeout, because if we time it out too quickly while it's still thinking in the background, the answer might not come through. Other times, because as we said, these are probabilistic systems, it may respond in a slightly different way each time. There may be a comma or an apostrophe or something. The formatting is a little bit off. So really what these applications are doing is they're kind of like, what's another example? Like, think of these tokens as like this stream, this river, right? This fountain. And you are trying to gather the important bits of that and shape it and refine it. And you need to take the raw output and pass it through your refining processes, so that on the other side, the user gets a very high quality product after it has already been through all of your data treatments and other things like that. So you'll notice that a couple of times I rerun the request because it may not have appeared the first time. Just give it another chance. These are things that I'm going to be able to improve over time. You can see it's also taking on some non-nautical routes. Maybe it's going over land, or it's not the most practical or the most efficient. So these are where you have to do a lot of testing to kind of figure out how you can show a route from Chennai port to Tokyo port with the shortest ETA. I mean, that's obviously a very valuable piece of information if you can figure that out. Again, luckily people have figured that out over time. Or let's find a safe route from Kaohsiung port to Subic Bay during monsoon season. I mean, these are prompts actually recommended by the AI itself, but I think that's really interesting. I mean, I may not have considered that. First of all, do we know where Kaohsiung port is? That's in Taipei. And Subic Bay is in the Philippines. So just knowing that is important information, and good thing is that the GenAI has lots of context. Now, what do you do during a monsoon season is, well, you'll probably have to look at the weather patterns as well as the up-to-date real-time weather data, and figure out how do I sail through all of this? How do I navigate through all of that, right? So the GenAI, I think, does a great first pass just using logic and making sure that it's calculating something that actually has a valid result, not a null result. So it has to have some level of math to it. There has to be some type of verifiably correct answer, even if it may not be incorrect, but it may not be the best possible answer. So then that's where you come in and you do your you do your refinement work, you do your tuning, you do your edge case handling, you fix bugs, you make things more reliable, more resilient to fail cases and those kinds of things. So obviously there's more work that I need to do on this, but I mean, these are just a bunch of random prompts here. I haven't tested every single one of them, but I'm pretty sure that they're all technically doable. It just needs to be worked through. And there's some complex ones, and sometimes you have to make decisions, you have to make trade-offs. It's like, okay, if I'm going to cross, for example, this is the meridian line, right? This is the Pacific, this is the time date zone change. So if I'm trying to calculate something, how am I accounting for the time zone change, right? Is my system, does the logic of calculating the number of days or the expected arrival dates, will that make sense if it arrives the same day that it left, even though it took more than, 12 or up to 24 hours? How would that even be possible? Well, that's where time zones come into play and other things like that. So working through all of that is a challenge, and it's something that I had to spend a lot of time on just to make this example work, because I was having an issue whereby by default all of the routes were going the long way. They were going from Asia. It was all heading western across Middle East, North Africa, Europe, and that's the long way. So how do I reorient this so that I'm more Pacifically oriented? That's a little bit different than how the original map makers originally designed the systems, but that's fine. We can adjust and those sorts of things. So just plotting, the direction around the world, around the globe is not the simplest task, but thankfully we've done it so many times. We've become experts at sailing around the world, and there's a lot of decisions to make. It's like there's the difference between the fastest route, maybe the most safe route, maybe other strategic stops along the way. For example, if I want to dock here, and then I've got multiple deliveries to make, and then I also want to take in new cargo. So is there like a multi-port route that I would want to take? Other things to consider are traffic congestion, right? Shipping lane congestion. Is the fuel price such that it's expensive for me to travel right now, or is it expensive for me to wait, to not be using the fuel to move products, right? So there's certainly so many different things that go into optimizing. In this case, we're trying to quantify the value of doing all this work, and we're going to use fuel as our proxy here. But there's other things, right? There's whatever else you want to consider, like the on-time delivery, the safety of the crew, of the cargo, and other things along those lines. So this tool can actually be quite robust, and I think it would immediately result in very positive ROI for any large company, even if they are using software already. Unlikely they have access to the latest and greatest tools. And so it's not just a technology shift, it's also a process thing, a change management thing. So if I'm like, let's say I'm trying to figure out how do I get from I want to go from Bangkok to Vietnam, right? And I can plot that out, and maybe Google Maps will give me a great answer. But what Google Maps may not have is all of my business or my corporate data along the way. Like, for example, where are my key waypoints? Do I have factories? Do I have other places that I want to drop cargo off, refuel, other things like that? what are some other routes that may not be necessarily the fastest, but it's more profitable for me to take, right? These are the kinds of questions that a simple route system may not have full context for. At the same time, if I'm driving, let's say I'm driving a truck and I've already keyed in my route and my dispatcher, my logistics company approved it, what if there's been a change and now I need to reroute? Or maybe the dispatcher comes and sends me a message and is like, hi driver, how's everything going? Listen, we've got this, we were gonna need to reroute you. It'd be better if you took these roads instead. If you'd like, I can go ahead and send you that updated route plan directly to your device. I'm driving. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, great, thank you. Go ahead and patch that through, and then it would update me. So there's still the human in the loop there. They can be kind of overseeing it, and they have the full macro picture, and they can help make those decisions, so that I, as the vehicle operator, right, I can stay focused on the road or stay focused on what's immediately in front of me and my immediate surroundings. Whereby the dispatch team, the logistics team, the team that has the full overview of everything that's going on, can then help coordinate not just my route but all the other vehicles, all the other moving parts in this supply chain. So I think that would be really, really useful and valuable. And I was inspired to do this based on my time in the region generally. I mean, I've definitely had my fair share of flights and seen lots of countries, visited lots of airports and so forth. This is also a very maritime shipping and trade is extremely important to this part of the world. If you look at it quite strategically, Thailand is it's got a very awesome location, because it's sort of right in the middle between three of the four most populated countries, right? You've got United States, but then the other the three big ones are China, India, and Indonesia. And Thailand's right there in the middle of these three. So in terms of a logistics hub, the airports of Thailand have connecting flights to almost all over major parts of the world. And this can be a very strategic location for multinational companies who want to tap into not just the very vibrant and growing Southeast Asia region, which is about, 500, 600, 700 million people, but also more broadly Asia, where this is the bulk of the population, or within this. I mean, if you draw a circle just here, you probably have more people that live in this area than the entire outside of that zone. A lot of young, vibrant economies, vast growth. If I was a global investor, macro investor, infrastructure investor, I would be very seriously looking to see how can I invest in this region, because this is a region that would really benefit and thrive from foreign direct investment. Most of the countries can definitely trade, and they do amongst the members of that trading bloc, but they're all have very similar economy sizes. So by attracting foreign investment, external investment from the U.S., like if I'm BlackRock, right, or if I'm even if I'm a bank like JP Morgan Chase, I would be looking to see if there are any investment opportunities in this part of the world, because that's where the next my next customers are going to be, my next employees for my company, right? These are going to be the next area to develop great property, other infrastructure. So I'd be looking to see, can I help fund some infrastructure projects here? Are there any ports that could be developed? Any expansions to airports? Are there any factories? Are there any other key supply chain infrastructure projects that I could invest into. Maybe I could purchase their bonds. I can offer them financing. And then as a condition precedent to that, or some kind of covenant, maybe I can also help bring in some of the raw materials that they'll need to produce that infrastructure. Or maybe it's an advanced manufacturing facility and I can connect them to suppliers that have the heavy machinery that they'll need to operate that plant. And then maybe I can also bring in management expertise and consultants who can come in and help train the team on the ground in these new methods. And maybe also, as part of these large infrastructure investments, I can also help seed fund some of the innovation in the startup ecosystem, who are going to help build those products and have those local connections and the local expertise, and also become the supply chain for the next public market companies, right? The next IPOs, right? Just as we're investing in our infrastructure to lay the foundation for the future growth of those economies, we want to be doing that for entrepreneurs as well. And we want to be able to ensure that they have the funding that they need to provide all this great innovation to the world. Because it would be such a shame to not have this incredible innovation and technology and products and services that make our lives better, easier, more fun, right? To make life more productive, to have more abundance, prosperity. And to starve these founders and entrepreneurs and to cut them off from the funding that they need to help propagate this amazing technology and to help bring about this new age of abundance, I think would be such a shame. So I would really encourage, and to the extent I can, I'm more than happy to help facilitate or help represent any trade organizations, bodies, to help bring funding and move and get the funding to the places that need it most, and that we would benefit from them having it the most. I think that is really, really key. That's your that's my pitch on sort of like how we use GenAI, ML, real-time data sources, historical data sources, and how we integrate this into a business process. And why is this so important? Because, like, how does that relate to what we're talking about here when I'm talking about these glasses? Well, I mean, these glasses had to be produced somewhere, right? And the materials for these glasses had to be procured, and I think I'm doing too much here. My computer's starting to slow down a little bit, and so it's like, how do for me to sell these products these are awesome products from Thailand to America, right? Because I have a lot of people in America, they want to buy awesome products from anywhere in the world, and Thailand has a bunch of them, and I want people to be able to have these great products. Why not? They're great, right? I mean, you have really great products, great food, other things. So let's connect. Let's do this cross-border. Let's do this connection. But of course, if there's a roadblock because, we don't have the shipping capacity, or we don't have the ports, and the boats are offshore, and what happened to the oil prices? And by the way, glass, it comes from materials. Do we have those materials? And by the way, it needs to fit on the store shelves because we have limited store shelf space. Or if we're selling direct to consumer, then anyways we're going to need to deliver it from the last mile perspective. So how do I give this pack of stackable cups, right? This great ocean glass stack of this pack of cups, these 6 cups, how do I get them to you in America? This pack of products, how do I get that to you in America? Well, I've got to do some. I got to make sure I have a supply chain, right? And if we have a very robust supply chain, crossing the Pacific Ocean, for example, this is where the bulk of the global trade is going to occur, right here. And that's not all, but that's a big amount. It's maybe it might be the majority, right? You have these two huge economies, China and the US, not to mention, right, Korea, Japan, all of Southeast Asia. Down under, we have Australia, New Zealand, right? And then, of course, you have all the Latin Americas, the Americas itself. This is a very key trade route, and there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just the fuel. It's not just the ships. It's also, is there a backlog in cargo? Can I not put my products on the ship because someone else has already purchased that? Or, do I have enough safe routes through this? Is there any weather or other things that are going to affect my shipment? And so how do I ensure across all of this, right, that all in, the price that actually hits the consumer is reasonable and it is still a net profit for the consumer, right? They are getting more utility from that purchase than what it cost them. I think that is, you have to factor all this in. So that's why I wanted to do this exercise, to begin to understand how can I help get customers the best products at the best prices, and to do it in a economically sustainable way, because it's all these add-on costs, right? You have the list price on the package, but then there's the shipping and the tariffs and the duties and the import fees and the other factors that go into the pricing that ends up distorting what you ultimately end up paying for it. So I think, and then even before that, there's still the raw materials to produce those products. And so this circular kind of economy is all kind of connected. And then that's ultimately, someone has to pay the price, and hopefully it's not always the consumer. But in some cases, if it's worth it, if the consumer still has their own personal profit margin and utility from those purchases, then maybe I think it's well worth it. So that's on this one. And then finally, just generally speaking, and I think there's this term that people talk about, unicorn, right? What's a unicorn? Unicorn used to be known as, the goal that every startup wanted to achieve. It's like, okay, I want to get to $1 billion valuation. If I can get to $1 billion valuation, I'm now big enough to go public, or I've created enough, enterprise value for like all my investors and employees and everyone involved in the cap table and everything else like that, right? And so I've built a substantial company, and maybe that's an arbitrary number, just a round number, $1 billion, but it's a goal. And so, I think all the startups are looking to go from, their idea stage, seed stage, to that, liquidity event, or that point in time whereby they've achieved a certain valuation, right? Or they've created enough value, and that's been recognized by other investors. So is there a formula for doing that? Is that a very repeatable playbook that we can just, you could just follow? Not quite, but there are a number of, I would say, common characteristics. If you look at the history, let's just go back, 10, 15, 20 years, and we can look at all of the big companies that have gone from, just a startup concept, a website or an app, to now a huge multi-billion-dollar company. If we just kind of reverse engineer some of the common characteristics, what are the things that we can find? Like, what are those things? And I used GenAI to do some deep research, and I created a list. Well, AI helped me create a list of 100 points or 100 milestones, right? If you think about it like a video game, this is like your quest, your journey to become a unicorn. And there's going to be, I wanted to make it simple, so we have 100 steps to get there. And so if you go through this tool, you'll get all the 100 steps laid out. And I mean, you could branch it and there's different ways to do it, but very likely is like you'll probably have most, if not, you'll have majority of these items checked off by the time you are a unicorn. So in some sense, I do think it's still valuable, even though many of us as startup founders are still very early in that journey. But I think it's nice to actually have a full multi-year, like 100-point plan to that. And you'll see that maybe step one is to conceive a scalable startup idea, right? That sounds so simple, but even that is quite a, that is it is a task to really get a good scalable startup idea. In this case, this is defined again using a lot of the kind of open knowledge out there in historical case studies. But what is the whole point of a startup? The startup is you have this idea that can grow by solving a problem for a definable market. And every startup starts with a defined market. There's an area of the economy or of the business world or of people's lives that is underserved, and they want to address that somehow. Or there's a new mousetrap that they can build that's so much better than the older one. And so, but it has to be a real enough pain point for people to make a shift, right? It can't just be slightly better. Sometimes it has to be 10 times better, 100 times better than the way before, right? So that's why it's so tricky, because a lot of people think that, oh, a startup is easy. I'll just do a small business. And that's not quite what a startup is. A startup, a tech startup, most of the time we're talking about tech startups. It's trying to design a business with a cost structure that will enable it to scale rapidly so that there's less limits on its growth, less physical limitations on the number of customers, users that it can serve, right? So immediately that would kind of make some businesses not quite qualified as a startup in that sense. It's like, well, let's say like I make really good pies or cookies, and all my friends love them, and it's like, okay, well, someone's gonna ask me like, hey, why don't you just like make it a business? Like, I'll buy from you. And you do that, and it's like, well, you sold it to all your friends and they like it and they like you, so they're more than happy to buy it. But then after a while, it's like, well, I've kind of eaten those cookies a lot, or that pie. Do you have any other products? Or I'm just like not in the market for that right now. So you end up exhausting that addressable customer base pretty quickly if you're only selling it just to your friends, for example. And so I think a lot of companies, and this is even true for startups, I think they get initial traction really easily. Like they figured something out that scales quite quickly, but I believe it's harder for them to continue that growth. They may have exhausted their total addressable market very soon, right? There's no new incremental buyers, and their products are not scalable in the sense that it's easy to sell 100, 1,000, or 1,000,000 customers, right? So I think it's a different, it's a different perspective when you're talking about startups. And here we're actually giving you examples where it says like Airbnb, they had an opportunity of like couch surfing, I guess, and Uber began with the frustration of not being able to hail a cab in San Francisco. So these are sort of like the founding stories, or that initial pain point that these startups were born from, right? An Airbnb, right? The founders couldn't afford rent. They wanted to stay somewhere, and hotels were booked out, and there was no other alternative. Uber, it's like, before now, Uber, Grab, Lyft, all of these ride-sharing, ride-hailing services, they're so ubiquitous. I mean, they're kind of almost like core parts of our lives in many ways, like how we get from home to work or get food and those kinds of things. Hard to even imagine living life without those, but that was the case. There was a time when you just couldn't order anything you wanted from a restaurant and have it delivered to you. I mean, that was just a different time, different world, and it's hard to even imagine what that would be like now, but this is the case. And I think there's going to be lots of those examples going forward. There's going to be things where it's like, wow, we before this we did it in such a different way. That's so interesting to see how the technology and the business model and then just the consumer habits change over time. So we have 100 different items here. We can look at them as kind of like a timeline. We can look at them as like a tech tree, I guess you could say, right? There could be a tech tree, or we can just do a list view. And so the idea is, like, if you're a startup and you're probably not all the way here at the unicorn status just yet, right? And you're not at late stage pre-IPO, not at expansion or Series B or C, not at Series B, not at Series A. You might even still be, pre-product market fit, or you might be still building the initial product. But the idea is, like, you can go through this list, and as you make progress, right, you've got an idea, you've got a great team, you've got your agreements in place, you've done the market research, right? You understand the competitive landscape and how you're different. You can define your value proposition, and you validated a large market opportunity. Now, these don't necessarily always have to be in sequence. You can do things in batches. You can do a few of these at once. But at some point, you'll probably have all of these done by the time you reach your final destination. You create a prototype or a proof of concept, right? In this case, we'll use, like, for example, Dropbox. Dropbox, before Google Cloud or Google Drive, Dropbox was one of the best ways to sync your files across different computers. So you might be at the computer at school, for example, and you had a few working files that you wanted to have access when you got home, and you can use on your personal computer. So you would use a service like Dropbox to sync those files across, or they could be photos, they could be really anything. And the initial traction that Dropbox generated in the very early days was they built just a demo video before the actual product, and they had a wait list where people would sign up. So they're kind of like saying, here's this coming soon product, if you're interested, sign up here. And that was how we got, like, initial distribution in those days. Like, people would be like, that looks cool. Nowadays, with GenAI, right, you wouldn't do that. You would just build the product. You would skip through so many different steps, and you go right to having the actual product, because it would be finished faster than you could actually generate the whole video and everything else like that. You might as well just put those tokens or put that time into building that initial product. But here's an example, right? So with the problem and market validation in hand, develop a rough prototype or mock-up of your product. This could be a clickable app demo, a simplified model, or even a storyboard. Something tangible that conveys how your solution will work. Demonstrating a prototype helps others visualize your idea and provides a basis for early feedback. It doesn't need to be fully functional. The goal is to showcase the concept and test key assumptions. And you'll notice that that's actually a big part of the early days of a startup, is like people are showing demos and prototypes and proofs of concept, and sometimes they're fully functional and sometimes they're just partially functional, but there's enough there for a user, a potential customer, to say, that looks cool, I'd love to see more, and can I even try it, right? So you're going to want to use those early users to get feedback. From that feedback, you're going to want to see how people use your product. Where are they getting stuck? I mean, a lot of times in our mind, we have this golden path that we assume that the way we designed it and how you move through that product is exactly how everyone's going to choose. But that's never the case, right? I mean, a lot of times people try something else, or they click there and instead of there, or they forgot this. And through watching them use your product, you learn, you iterate, you refine, and you make it easier and less likely that they'll have a bad experience, right? You're going to outline a basic business model. You're going to seek mentors, advisors, or an accelerator. You're going to choose a company name and a brand identity, and you'll formally incorporate the company. And then finally, you'll bootstrap the initial funding. I mean, so a lot of these things could happen in parallel, right? So maybe you want to start with the company name and brand identity first. Maybe you already know there's a market opportunity, and now you're trying to figure out what is your unique value proposition. So the point is that this doesn't have to happen in sequence, but most likely that these conditions, right, are going to be required for before you end up experiencing that ultimate goal of becoming the unicorn, right? So as I make progress on this, I can mark them as completed, and you'll notice that my progress is being updated here. Now, very simplistic way to think about this, again, extremely simplistic way, but I think it's interesting, is if you're saying that you're 21% of the way towards $1 billion valuation, what does that mean? I mean, what is 21% of $1 billion, right? Are we really worth, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars at this point? No, but maybe it could be a percentage of that, right? Maybe this startup that we're in right now, or our company, we have the basis, we have the foundation to become a big company. Maybe that has some intrinsic value, right? It may not be 50 million or 200 million in value, but maybe 5 million, 10 million in value, maybe 2 million if you're being really conservative. But there's got to be some value to that. There has to be, because for anything to exist, it must first be probable, right? Anything that exists has a probability of greater than 0. And so just by the fact that we are existing now and we are building this right now means that there's more than a 0% chance that this company will be worth $1 billion, right? We don't know exactly what percent, like what the ultimate probability will be, but we do know that if we take the right actions, we can help increase that probability. So to the extent you want to discount my valuation from $1 billion, future valuation, and say, you've proven enough, you've de-risked it enough, we can see you're very, very capable, you're one of the best founders, people that we've ever seen, one of the most innovative, very well accomplished, and have proven you understand the finances, the economics, the geopolitical, the macro, the micro, you have connections, you are out of the box thinker, you're very diligent, very dedicated. To me, you're worth at least some percentage of $1 billion. And so what is that percentage? Is it 1%? Is it half of 1%? I think that's a fair kind of value. I mean, that's a fair discussion to have. And when we go back to what we were saying earlier about trying to make sure that we can utilize resources and put that funding and put those resources to use in the right way with trusted partners, proven partners, we should definitely do that, because it's one of those things that has just a net positive, right? Whether we're expanding the market, we're increasing the size of the pie, or we are getting it early into a growing sector, a growing region, right? We want to be an anchor investor in your fund, in your project, in your opportunity, right? And we want to syndicate this round as well, right? We want to bring in other co-investors, and let's make it a joint venture, and let's be in business together, and let's make it a win-win. and we'll be strategic about it, but we'll have different time frames in terms of our expected return on that investment. There are some actions and activities that we can do right now to save us millions of dollars on fuel. And to me, or to the business, that is worth what percent? And over time, as you're providing that solution and increasing market share and diversifying your own portfolio to have more products across more different, more revenue streams, across more regions, right? Not just Thailand, but also include, you could have customers in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Hong Kong, in Japan, in Indonesia, in all over the world, right? US, Europe. That has a multiplying effect on the value. And so I can make long-term investments in terms of the infrastructure. I can make long-term investments in terms of startups. And then to help me get like some immediate value, or return, I can implement your solutions in my businesses. And so that already, just by the saving of the amount that I would be saving, or you would be saving my company, or the new revenue opportunities that you're bringing me, is already paying for that initial investment. So this is the easiest investment ever to make. It's almost like it's a free investment in the sense of you're getting equity even in exchange for just becoming a customer. I mean, that is really a pretty amazing deal. So I would be looking really strongly into investing into someone like that, or a company like that, because, as I said, like, there's so many moving parts to this supply chain, and some regions really need more foreign direct investment. It's how they grow, right? They've pretty much maxed out their immediate kind of addressable market. And so a lot of these companies, they want to go international. They want to be cross-border. And maybe they lack the partners, or they just don't have the infrastructure to go cross-border, right? Or to go like cross-Pacific, right? Or global. But with these tools and with the right partners and the right representatives and ambassadors and people in our joint venture, we can really go global, and that's really, really exciting. So I think we'll have a new Amazon, a new Alibaba, right? There will be a new Uber. You can even look at companies like Flexport, Palantir, these kind of like next generation technology companies. I think there will be even more of them, and it is such a amazing opportunity, amazing time to be investing in this space, and to just start first finding these return on investment immediately in our own portfolio companies. But then, like, as we learn and as we expand, right, we can offer these kind of solutions to even our competitors. Or maybe there's not so fierce competitors. Maybe, I mean, think about it. If you're a company selling to, I don't know, airlines, right? It's hard to be, and you're selling equipment to global airlines. It's hard to just like sell only to one airline, right? You're going to want to be able to sell to all of the airlines, or many of them possibly, right? So I think that is I think that's where you keep the investment at. You make these independent, you still have them as independent companies. These are minority investments, right? But you can grow together, right? As an anchor customer, as an anchor investor, we can grow together. So I think that's really powerful. And also I believe that the work that we're doing is helping to pave the way for broader adoption of generative AI across more aspects of the economy than what we're currently seeing in the market right now. Just take, for example, the shipping example here. If you're out on a boat, on a ship in the middle of the ocean, or you're on a plane, right? The LLM, there's no internet access, right? Your internet access is not going to be stable. So you're going to need a local model. I mean, you're going to have a local model running. So you're going to need to be able to build flexible architectures that, once connected to a larger system, can upload, download to get the latest data. But in between, as you're moving from port to port and your internet connection may not be stable, you still need a system locally that can do that processing, that can help provide some guidance, that can still be very, very useful. And you're going to need to train that and run that locally. And I think that's also why now's a good time for these large model companies to release open source models, because if we are completely reliant on having an internet connection for all of this whole system to be working, and then we lose connection to that API or to the internet, and then nothing will work, that's not resilient, right? That's poor architecture design from a systems engineering standpoint. So you're definitely going to want to have some fallback systems. You're going to want to be able to have some predicting systems. If you don't have some data, can you fill in those gaps, right? And you're going to want to run models that can run locally on local devices, local hardware that does not require internet access 100% of the time, because we don't have internet access across 100% of the world and at 100% of the time. So when you're getting into some of these other jobs like oil rigs and container ships, cargo planes, and those, and even just international flights, for example, you may not have internet until you land. So in order to navigate the landscape of AI, I do think it's going to require both global LLMs, of course, the highest end API providers, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Grok, all those. But then the local models are also going to be really useful, right? Whether that's you're in China, you want to use Alibaba or DeepSeek or the models from Baidu, Tencent, or you're using Meta, for example, or even Google has Gemma. So and I think OpenAI is going to be releasing a powerful open source model or open weights model soon as well. So I think this interoperability is going to be really important. So even the global LLM companies, the big cloud providers and those that are providing the highest end AI today, they still want their supply chain of their developers to still use their tools and to make sure that when they do connect, they update. And so I think that's why the local model and helping to define that architecture and how those integrations work is important. It's like you can go around the world and some appliances can't be plugged in because you're using a different electrical socket, so you might need an adapter. Or in some cases, the appliance just won't work at all because of the way it's constructed or the way it consumes power or whatever it may be. So to the extent that we can create these interoperable systems across all of the components in the supply chain, helps smooth things out. And you take in the feedback, you listen to your user base, your developers, the customer base, and you try to calibrate your decision so that ultimately you become a unicorn, or you become a $1 trillion market cap company, right? And so I think that we're on that path. Whether you think we're at 10% of a billion, 20% of a billion, or even if you just think, you know what, you're probably only at 1% of a billion, and I'm going to discount it by half from that, we got to start somewhere, right? So whether it's 50 basis points off of a billion or whatever, right? We got to start somewhere. And as we go, right, we are de-risking and increasing value, de-risking and increasing value. And that's when you can kind of have that exponential curve. And so we need a few points, right? Because to create a curve, you need more than just 1 or 2 points or even 3 points, right? Maybe you probably need 4, if not even 5 points, right? At 5 points, you can start to plot a curve, mostly pretty reliably. So I think we're getting very, very close to that, and I think we have a lot of awesome use cases and just industries that are, I don't want to say the word waiting to be disrupted, because that sounds like they're going to be completely caught off guard and supplanted. I don't think that's going to happen in this world. I think the way it's going to work is that we're going to embrace, right, each other in that sense, where the industry is going to look to see like all this technology that they have access to, but how do I apply it into my business, and what are those changes I need to make, or how do I need to adapt? And then on the technology side itself, instead of just constantly trying to build a solution, looking for a problem, or try to create one solution, one size fits all. Be more adaptive. Think about it. Think about the world from a global perspective. I mean, the nice thing about the U.S. is that it's a very large single market as compared to some of the trading blocks, whereby you can look at Europe as a very interesting market, but all of these different jurisdictions, regulations, and languages that you have to speak if you're gonna trade with Europe, versus the US, you have just one big market that you can do business with. So it is a very it is the premier market of the world. And I know that there are so many awesome products coming from this Southeast Asia region, especially in Thailand, for example, that would love to find a home in America, right? And I know that there are so many customers over in America who are just dreaming about having some awesome products coming from Thailand. So why don't we just connect these two, and we can facilitate that, and we get some funding, and we make it happen. Sounds like a good idea. I think it's a good idea. AI says it's a good idea. So what do you guys think? All right, that's all I have to talk about for today. Talk to you guys later. Bye.